Welcome to LogisticsSales.com, where today we'll be talking about building trust and open communication. So stick around and let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of LogisticsSales.com, where we'll continue on our series on establishing sustainable relationships. Today, I'm your host, Dean, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Damon.
Hello, hello.
And Gail.
Hi, guys.
So let's get started. As today, we're going to talk about the cornerstone of lasting relationships in sales, which is trust and open communication. Without them, it's tough to build partnerships that are sustainable, whether you're dealing with your customers, your vendors, or even your internal team. Building that rapport helps open the door to so much in business. And today I'm really looking forward to diving into this with Damon and Gail. And we're going to touch on a lot of practical terms that you're going to be able to apply in your journey in sales. So let's unlock a few of the secrets, I guess you could say, in sales, Damon. We're going to look at understanding trust in sales. What does that mean?
So understanding trust in sales is, how do we get a customer to purchase what we're selling, right? It's building that connection between us and them, and really having that bond to get them to entrust that we're going to take care of them. We're going to service them. What we're offering is actually legitimate. And usually this is like the hardest thing that salespeople struggle with, is how do you become somebody that can take that trust from a customer, and how do you earn it, right? So it's the biggest question. It's the biggest obstacle as well. Like if you don't have that trust with that client, it's very hard to really push forward in any sort of connection and any forward movement if you don't build that trust first. So it becomes a very vital, or an extremely vital part in building that relationship, which is going to actually end up in the sale. And that's what we're kind of here to do, is how do we finish, and how do we start a process if we don't understand the trust aspect of it. And so what we want to do is kind of give you like that contextual concept of and saying, okay, how can I understand, why is this so important? And how do I not make this transactional, and really just like part of the process where, you know, if we understand what that trust component is, we're able to start moving forward. And this is, again, going back to like a lot of salespeople become robotic. And this is why sales pitches don't work. Right. So if you're just in a robotic sales pitch and you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, and you forget about the actual connection that we're trying to make, then that sale is probably not going to happen for you. And so getting into the emotional side of it and saying, hey, you know what, I really got to earn someone's trust. How do I really get someone to understand that I'm here to help in that situation, not here to take in that situation? And so, yeah, let's go and get into a few tips.
Yeah, and I would also just kind of add that when it comes to building that trust factor, it can be challenging for like a new sales rep to figure out, how do I get that person to trust me? How do I build this rapport with that customer? But once you've done it once, it really actually does become a lot easier. So building those habits, building those practices into your daily sales practice, then kind of builds off of it. So as you continue to build customers in your future sales, that building trust becomes easier and more streamlined throughout the process. So it's really going to be a great episode where we give you guys the tools in order to do that.
And I think as we jump into it, Damon, before I turn it back to you, there's so many different internal skills that you want to make sure you're also working on. And I think confidence has a lot to do with it, because when you're talking to somebody on the other side, you want to come across confident and aware of what's going on. Because if you're sitting there talking to somebody, there's nothing worse than, you know, those awkward pauses where maybe they ask the question and you don't know the answer. And it's always, you know, not that you're going to know everything, especially in the beginning, like Gail was just saying, but as you're doing this and you're gathering the information, when you're able to, you know, be the person to help, like you were saying, solve their problems, it gains that trust, you know, exponentially faster if you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so, you know, great points. And what that really comes down to is how do we gain that trust? One is you have to be able to understand your customer and really put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, well, what type of calls are they facing on a day-to-day basis? You know, what issues are they facing on a day-to-day basis? And we covered this in some of our previous episodes, but really just understanding like, hey, you know what is that customer really looking for from their perspective, their shoes, right? And also the second part of that is just having answers for them, like you said, right, Dean? And it's how confidently can you answer those questions so there's not those awkward pauses, right? Pause when you need someone to really think about what you're saying, but then also know that, if you're not comfortable in answering those questions, then be comfortable in taking time to get back to that customer and let the customer know in a transparent way, hey, I don't have the answer for you right now, but let me explain how I can get that answer to you. And so that these parts of communication become vital in earning that trust from somebody. And you don't want to fake the part either. You need to build experience into that. You need to have authenticity in that. The customer needs to be able to feel that you actually are there to actually help solve those problems by the answers that you're giving them. And the knowledge part becomes so much important in that aspect, right? If they're asking you a bunch of questions and you have absolutely no way of answering these questions, they're going to lose that trust in you right away. There's no, that reliability, that trust factor is just going to be diminished. So again, the better preparation that you do, you're going to help build that trust factor as well. And, and we think about why do some salespeople do better than others, or why are some salespeople trusted better than others? It's because they're prepared. And again, it's that confidence level, right? How do you do so much repetition that you become confident in what you're saying? And that's the only way that in sales you do gain that confidence, is through that repetition. And just understand that it's a process. And not many people, and again, we experience this a lot in our sales training, but when anyone's starting off in the beginning, they're maybe not sounding as confident as possible because they don't really have all the answers. But as soon as you understand that there's only a couple simple answers that you can give in any sort of situation, and there's only a couple of real questions that really pop up, once you understand that, then it's building that fluidity in your conversation, and just having that conversation and being like, now you're prepared, right? Every time you get asked a question you don't know, write it down, right? Take a moment to review it and say, how would I have answered this differently next time? And what we typically tell our new reps is record the conversation, right? Re-listen to your own conversations, or just, if you don't have a recording device, play it back in your mind. What did I say? How did I say it? What part of the conversation went right? What went wrong? How can we improve it? And all these things are going to help you become a better communicator. But just understand, the repetition part has to happen for you to get better and to start building that trust, and to create that confidence in yourself to say, hey, you know what? Next time that question comes around, I got the answer for it.
Yeah. And in our training, I hope by now, with all the episodes that you've been tuning in on, you can see that we're coming from a place of more relational than transactional. We're talking about relationships and how important it is to, not just gain trust and open up lines of communication with your customer, but to be credible. I've had instances in my sales journey where you're talking to your customer and you understand what their pain points, and sometimes it's okay to say no, as much as you don't want to. If you have a special expertise, like in our services, we look and provide a lot of expedited shipping services across North America, and a customer might be dealing with something local, and that's just something that we would not be an expert at, I guess you could say. And knowing that you could say no, but understand what they're going through, it's okay to tell them, we can't help with that, but, and then offer us another solution. And that adds credibility, and that credibility goes so far in building trust in your relationship with that customer, and shows them that you are listening, hearing, and trying to help solve those problems, even if you can't do it directly. And I know with a lot of new sales reps, we find, they want to do something so quickly, they'll say yes to just about anything, knowing that they might not be able to excel. And when they do that, sometimes if you offer something that you can't do, you're going to ruin future opportunities with them, because you're setting yourself up to fail. And here with our training, we want to help you set yourself up for success, and that's why we're here. And we want to see you succeed and hear about some of those challenges you're facing. So make sure you're still sending those comments in, and we look forward to get back into you also. So.
Yeah, some great points, Dean. And, those are some great tips that there's so many things that you can communicate to your customer and take action on immediately. So if you're promising, let's say, for example, 24/7 service, make sure you're picking up your phone at any time of day, right? If you promise that, you have to start delivering on it. And those are things that can help you build trust right away with your clients, right? During that first interaction, second interaction, third interaction, is you have to be able to demonstrate that what you're saying, you're able to back up. And because the more times you're able to kind of back up something, and a simple strategy is just like, hey, you're on a phone call with a customer and you say, hey, I'm going to email you this information. How quickly do you do it? Do you wait half a day, 2 days to get back to a customer? How quickly are you responding to their emails? These are all things that are going to help build that trust immediately, and they're real basic steps. And then the thing is, like, if you don't have the answer for somebody, how quickly do you get that answer for them? And so all these things are just ways for you to connect with that customer and to start delivering. And when you start delivering on the promises that you're making them, now you're building that trust instantly with them.
And I think it's really important to put yourself in your customer's shoes, because if they're waiting for an email, if you were that customer, how long would you want to wait? Or how quickly, if you would get this message, how quickly you'd be impressed with that person. So, think about those things when you're dealing with those customers, and what is it you think they would want to see, or what you would want to see to help you get to where you're going.
And remember also, like, the customer's telling us that, right? If they're talking to you and saying, hey, they'll ask you specific questions. So when you respond back to them, make sure you're addressing that in your email. Make sure you're addressing that in the next conversation. You have to listen really well to the customer. Again, this is to go up a level, is really, don't bombard them with the stuff that you just want to send them. Make sure you're addressing the stuff that the conversation that they had, and everyone's going to have a different conversation with you. For some people, A and B might be important. For somebody else, B and C might be important. But you have to really listen in the conversation and say, okay, what is he really looking for? Is he looking for, something specific from myself? Is he looking for something specific from the company? Is he looking something specific for himself about their company? What is it that I have to offer him that he's looking for? And really address those questions and clearly communicate that to your client.
Thanks, Damon. And I think we've given a lot of really good information and tips and tricks on how to kind of start building that trust with your relationships with your partners. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is go ahead and download that worksheet, and you're going to find that question number 1 is actually going to be to write down 3 basic actions or skills that you can take to build trust with a new client. So we've given you several in that last segment there, so you should have plenty to pick from, but what really resonates with you, your line of work and the business that you're in, and see what you think would be the best ways for building trust between you and customers. Now we're going to head into the next section here today, and I think it's really important when it comes to building trust. One of the biggest things is going to be transparency. If you don't have transparency, you kind of have that gray area in between you and your customer when it comes to conversations that leaves a lot up for interpretation. And when you are having these types of conversations, you don't want those. You want to be able to be very clear, very succinct, and have both parties know exactly what's going on in the situation. And, kind of reiterating what Dean was saying earlier and Damon was saying, it's okay to say no to a customer if it's not something you specialize in, if it's not something that we are experts in. Sometimes it's better for the trust and the stability of that relationship to say, look, I'm not the best person for this type of like this type of service or this type of product, but here's some recommendations on people that could help you, but this is what we can do and this is how it's going to help benefit your company. So finding those kind of conversation points throughout the interaction that you're having actually adds to that credibility, because they know that you're not there to just swindle them into getting a sale. You're there to help them and you're there to service them, and that's going to be really, really important when it comes to building those relationships.
And so many times, it's offering that referral and saying, hey, maybe if I don't do the best, or if this is not a good fit for what we do, here's someone where it could be a good fit for. And it's always putting that customer first, right? Saying, okay, what's in the best interest of my client? What's in the best interest of for him to get the best experience possible? And even that referral can reflect back on you. And this is something important to understand, is that if you help your client in any which way, and he knows that, Gail's the person that comes and helps me in this situation. And even if it's not her herself, she's looking out for my best interest. And so when you give to that client, they're going to find ways to try to give to you back as well. It's just again, when someone really cares about you deeply and doesn't have has your best interest at heart, you're the person that they want to talk to.
Absolutely. And when you take that scenario, say it was that scenario where you're not excelling that one specific service that they're looking for, and you refer them to somebody else, and you refer them to somebody that you're aware does a great job, that customer may be even talking to somebody on the reverse side, looking for somebody that excels in what you do. And next thing you go, well, I got the perfect carrier. They helped me out when I was going through this, and they actually do what you're looking for. And all of a sudden now you've got this referral for somebody that you didn't even do the work for. You just helped somebody out. And like you were saying, they're going to help you out back when the opportunity presents itself. So there's so many ways for you to do that when you're building that relationship.
Yeah, and nobody wants to be in a situation where again, working with the wrong client, right? Or trying to provide a service that we were not really good at providing. So again, this is the whole part about being transparent with somebody and saying, hey, our specialty, like I know we face this a lot in our transportation side, is we specialize in full truckload service. So we don't try to pretend to be the expert in places that we don't go to, or smaller shipments that we may not specialize in. I mean, there's some that we do, but we also understand the ones that we don't. And then again, we provide good partners in those situations, even if it's on the truckload side, right? Sometimes maybe we're not the best provider for that company, but we recommend the people that might be, and just say, hey, you know what, you might want to look into these as options, because they'll be able to better serve you. But hey, if something falls into our niche and what we are really good at, then we'd love to help you in that and see if we can make it work. But otherwise, hey, you know what, we just want you to be happy at the end of the day, and there's enough business to always go around. So we never have that mindset that there's scarcity.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things, and Damon, you said it right there, is it's giving them options. It's saying, this is what you're looking for. We might not fit the bill on that exactly, but here is an option of somebody who might be a better fit for you. And also here is alternatively other scenarios or solutions that we can offer that may fit into the criteria that what you're looking for. And honestly, what that does is it just builds that trust and that integrity in you as a person. They know that, oh my goodness, this person is here to help me. They're going to help me find solutions. They're not always in it for, making a quick buck. They just want to make sure that the relationship is stabilized, that we are providing the support that they need, so that we can continue to build that relationship as time progresses, and continue to build off of it and really become stronger in that dynamic. And really, it all just comes down to honesty and integrity. That's got to be your number one when it comes to building trust. You have to be honest in those interactions, and you have to come at them with with an open heart and be there in an active service.
Yeah, you got to know that people are pretty good at judging where you're coming from. Like, if you're not honest and you're not really worrying about that customer, they're going to feel that through the questions you're asking or not asking, and just the way you're coming across. So if, again, you're truly coming from a place of service, you can't go wrong. But you got to do a bit of a gut check to make sure your intentions are right.
And you're so right about, like, someone's going to find out if you're trying to pull a fast one on them or you're lying to them. Like, anyone that has more experience or is an expert in their area, like, they know the terminology. And they know how it works, and they have years of experience at it. So is it in your best interest to try to pull something on somebody and make yourself look bad in that situation? Or is it better to be honest? And I notice a lot of times is when you're honest, the person that has experience understands that hey, you know what, at least they're being honest with me. I'd rather give this person a chance versus the person that's trying to lie to me and try to pull a fast one on me, because they know, right? And the same thing, like, knowing that people are going to pass that judgment if we're trying to fake our way through something. Or again, if I'm an architect and I'm talking to somebody that is maybe a builder or somebody else that's trying to give me specifications on doing something, like if I'm an engineer or architect, I kind of know that information, right? And no one's going to be able to fake those numbers to me, right? It's either it's precise or it may not be right.
And there's nothing worse than, even with our company, you have people always reaching out because they're looking to grow their business, and there's nothing worse than getting an email from somebody who you want them to take the time to look into, see what they're presenting, and they're sending the information and they're sending it to the wrong person. You want to know that the person that you're working with is putting in the time to reach out and communicate with you from being honest, transparent, and credible. And right away, if you send an email to somebody and you misspell their name or you send it to the wrong person, your credibility's shot, and that's that one chance for that first impression.
And I know with myself, I'd rather have somebody ask me for help versus trying to pull a fast one over me. And if someone's asking for help and being honest about it, I'm more likely to help that person.
Yeah. And this is going to lead us right into the next section here, which is how do we build that transparency in those tough situations? Being honest and being, filled with integrity is super easy when everything's going, very well and everything's good. But when things get tough, that's when a lot of the times we see people start to try to pull those fast ones because they don't want to have to deal with those hard conversations. They don't want to have to deal with the back and forth and dealing maybe with somebody who's upset or who's angry at what has happened in regards to the sale or the transportation consultation or whatever it is that you're selling with your product or service. But it really comes down to just being honest with every interaction and knowing, even if it's going to be a rough conversation, if the person on the other end is really upset and emotional, at the end of the day, coming with it with honesty is always going to be the best option. You have to be honest about it, because like Damon said, everything comes back to bite you in the butt later on if you don't come at it with honesty, because they'll find out. Like, it always comes out, the truth will out, as they say. But like really good examples of that is we've seen customers that have had shipments that have to go for deliveries and they want 24 hours to offload. So, when it comes to us, we don't do that in most cases unless it's special circumstances. But we've seen carriers that say, yeah, no problem. They go ahead, they take the load, they pick it up, they deliver. And when they get there, they start making a fuss about, oh no, we have to get this live offloaded. You got 2 hours or we're going to charge you. And now that customer is upset because now they're having to pay wait times after those 2 hours. Whereas if it was myself or Dean or Damon, if we're having that conversation with the customer right off the bat, we would say, look, we don't typically offer this, but here are your alternate solutions. We could do drop trailer situations, like depending on what it is in the situation, we'll come up with creative solutions in order to make it work for the customer. And if it comes down to having to charge them for detention from those 2 hours onwards, we have that conversation ahead of time so that they don't get blindsided later on. It's very transparent and it's very two-way conversation so that both parties know exactly what's going on and what they're getting into beforehand.
And Gail, when you talk about like that two-way conversation, it's also important to understand, like, how do people get in that situation where they feel like they have to be fake with the customer? And I think a lot of times is when the sales rep feels the pressure, right? They feel the pressure of, I need to produce sales, I need to land that customer, or the customer service has to be exceptional, and they really feel the pressure from the client to be able to answer that question, and sometimes they try to fake it, right? But I think the important thing to remember is just take that deep breath, right? When you feel uncomfortable in a situation, just pause for a moment and just take a breath and really think to yourself, like, how do I want to show up in a situation? Do I want to be honest? Or who do I want to be as an individual, right? And when you kind of take that into consideration, just pause and just take that moment, and the best outcome will occur from that, just by taking that moment to think about it. Like, who do I want to be when it comes to this sales process? Do I want to be authentic, or do I want to try to fake my way through something?
Yeah. And I would also add that at the end of the day, we're all human. Even if you are the best sales rep out there, if you have done everything you can to make sure everything goes right, things will still happen. There's not everything that you can control. Things do happen, especially in transportation. There's always things we can't control. But coming at it where we just communicate with that customer on a peer-to-peer level really does go a long way. If there are delays in transit, you let them know. You say, hey, this is what's going on, and let them know before they call you to find out what's going on. That's one of the most important things we encourage our sales reps, is to make sure that you're not having them have to reach out to you to get updates. We should be updating them. If something goes wrong, they need to know ASAP, and just, own up to mistakes when they do happen, and make sure you come at them with solutions as well. If something does go wrong, say, okay, this is what happened. This is what we're planning to do to fix it. And that's that accountability part where you're coming at it from, okay, this didn't go exactly according to plan, but here's my plan to get it back on track so that it's not going to impact you as my customer too much. And that's where you're going to, again, continue to build that transparency, because they're going to know, even if things do go awry, they have your back. And that's exactly what they want out of that relationship. They want to know that you have their back.
And many times, Gail, we've seen it so many times where when you have that transparency with that customer, again, you handle that situation properly, you give them honest information, they're going to come to you again, even though they might be frustrated at that moment. And sometimes, it comes out in anger, it comes out in reprimand in some way or another. But it's temporary. And the thing to understand that, if you're able to get through these type of situations, the thing that comes out on the other side of this is that if you show your accountability to that client and say, hey, you know what, regardless of what situation I'm in, regardless of what's happening, if I'm able to demonstrate the service to them and who I am as an individual, it's your opportunity to really differentiate yourself. And what happens because of that is next time an opportunity comes up, they're going to talk to you about it. Because again, they're like, hey, you know what? I was harsh on this person, I was really strict with them, but you know what? They came and delivered. And so for that person that really stands up in that type of situation and is able to deliver to that customer regardless of what's coming at them, they're going to come back to you with those inquiries. And a lot of times we've gained, additional volumes from that customer, or more business comes from that customer. Or when they're going to talk about the experience that they've had with us, a lot of times they'll refer us to even other people and say, you know what, I had an issue with this company, but this is how they dealt with it. And because they know how to deal with the situation, people again just want to feel like they're listened to. And when they're being listened to and something's being done about what they're complaining about, again, if you're talking to them with transparency, honesty, and just with your own integrity, a lot of these things are going to come back to boost your sales career in the future.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with this in our everyday lives. You go out and you buy some new clothing, or you buy something online and it comes and there's something wrong with it. And most people have had an experience with really good customer service and really, really poor customer service. And oftentimes that dictates whether or not you're going to be a repeat customer. When you buy a t-shirt and maybe like the stitching is going, and you go to one of the vendors and you say, hey, look, my stitching's going, it's brand new, like, what do I do? And they say, sorry, man, you're on your own, you bought it, it's yours now. You're less likely to go buy a shirt from that company again. But if you go to somebody and they're like, no problem, just keep that one. We'll send you a new one in the mail free of cost. Don't worry about shipping. You're going to be like, wow, this customer service is great. I really want to work with these guys again. I really want to buy their products again. So we've seen it in our daily lives, but it also, it transcends most industries in a lot of circumstances. So remember that just being transparent and having good customer service really does go a long way to building those rapports. And then when it comes to transparency in everyday conversations, specifically in like transportation and logistics, it's really easy to add transparency into your conversations, communicating things like your timelines, making sure costs are clear, relaying potential challenges before they might even come up. Like if you know that there's going to be weather challenges, saying, hey, look, we're expecting a snowstorm to come in. This could impact your ETA. Just having that transparency in those conversations is going to build that credibility. There's also things like using plain language and repeating the words of your customer back to them. If they say acronyms and they know exactly what they're talking to them, speak to them in that language. But if maybe they're not so well versed and they don't understand the jargon of your industry, for example, in trucking, we use things like FTL, LTL, COD, OTR. If you don't know the language, that doesn't make sense. But if you say full truckload, less than truckload, cash on demand, over the road, it makes a lot more sense, and they can start to interpret it, and they understand that you're there to make sure it makes sense for them and to make it easy for them. And that's going to be really important for them to go, okay, I can go talk to Dean because I know he knows what I need out of this conversation.
So I think what you're saying is over communicate versus under communicate.
Exactly.
Over inform versus under inform. And what happens in the long run is that a customer will let you know, like, hey, thank you for all the information. I don't need this, and this, right? But that's better than the opposite happening, where it's like, I needed this information and you weren't providing it. I don't know what's going on, right? But over communicate it, and the customer will guide you, right? They'll make your job easier and let you know what you need to keep sending them and what you don't.
Yeah, and I think for long-term business, it's actually a really good method, because you may have to do a lot more extra work in that beginning stage. But as you build that customer and they've come to trust you, they won't even ask as many questions because they already have that faith in you. They know that you're going to handle their freight. They know you're going to communicate issues. And so they're not going to, inquire quite as much because they've put their faith in you and they're happy with the service.
Excellent. So that goes right into question number 2, true and false. Question that we have here is, transparent communication means only sharing positive information with your clients. Answer that, true or false.
So now we've talked about communication and telling our customer a lot of things that they need to hear, what you're able to do to help with their issues. And now we're going to look at it from the other side, and we're going to talk about active listening, which is another important skill. Today we're talking about building trust and open communication. But with that open communication, it's almost the open communication builds trust. There's a saying out there that says, be interested more than interesting, meaning that you want to be interested in what the other person is saying. And it's human psychology, without getting too deep into things. When somebody is speaking to somebody new they don't know, the more they speak, and a lot of people love talking about themselves. So as they're talking about themselves to somebody that they just met, and they're going on, and you're sitting there listening, they're giving you tons of information about themselves. So you put yourself in a situation of sales, they're giving you a lot of the stuff that you need to know to help them with their problems. But when they walk away from that conversation, they leave with this feeling of trust, because they feel like they've they related to a certain extent, but they were the one doing the talking. So take the time to be listening and write down if there's things you don't understand, because the customer sometimes might not come right out and say this is the problem, because some things they're dealing with, they might not just want to openly say why they're not performing or why they're having problems, but they'll tell you in a certain way if you're listening actively. And there might be some things you might have to write down and do a little research and come back and build what you can do for them. And if you're listening actively, you might also be able to find the right question to ask them to get that information from them.
So Dean, just don't want to put you on the spot here, but I just have a question.
No.
And just to make it easier for our viewers, is a lot of times I've seen this thing backfire, right? Where you have a new sales rep and they're asking too many questions, right? So how many times do we get that call, whether it's from the person inside the mall, or we get the call on our phones, and they start asking us all these questions. Hey, which provider are you with? And how much are you paying right now? And we get bombarded with, oh, how long are you in your contract? So we get these questions, and then like they frustrate us because we're like, who are you, first of all? Why are you asking me so many questions? I don't even think I want to divulge any of this information to you. How do we, how do I get out of that situation? So a lot of times I've seen it where sales reps are asking these questions, and the customer's getting frustrated, right? Because they're like, hey, I'm trying to do my work. Why are you wasting my time? Is there any tips on how to ask those questions? How that sales rep can better formulate active listening, and build that relationship with the client.
I think this topic on today's whole topic on building trust and open communication is the skill of listening, and not just asking too many questions, but actually listening to what they're saying. And maybe the questions you do ask are turning around and asking them questions about what they've been talking about, to show that you're paying attention and trying to understand exactly what they're looking for, instead of just, some people have that sales pitch, especially a lot of new people in sales, they're not even listening. They just want to get that pitch across. But if you're listening properly and they're talking about their problems, you can get your pitch in by answering the questions that you're getting from the information you're receiving. So I think that's one of the most important tips, and it's great through the active listening. It shows you're paying attention, it shows you're interested in what they're going through, and it shows you want to help because you're trying to learn as much as you can.
So I like what you said about the pitch. I think it's important for people to know too, you can change your pitch around. It doesn't have to come off in the exact way that you've written your pitch, but understand that if you take a piece here, take a piece there, and you learn how to move it around so it makes sense with the conversation you're having with the client instead of just doing a pitch, then again, you're going to have a lot better conversation.
Yeah. And another thing, this is great. Gail's great at this too. I've loved seeing Gail in action when it comes to relational. If you're actively listening, there's been times where, we'll be out with a customer and they'll say something like, oh, just in casual conversation, you're listening and you're being interested in what they're saying. And they say, I'm looking for, it's leading up to Christmas. I'm really looking to the year because my husband and I are going to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary on this date. And I've been through, with Gail walking out, and she's like, did you hear that? They're going on their 25th wedding anniversary, and she's already marked it down on her calendar. And guess who's getting a congratulations for your 25th anniversary? And those little things, if you're listening, has nothing even to do with the pitch or the sale. But it's building trust, and it's building a relationship by relating to things outside of the business, which is just as important.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite stories is a customer of mine. We went for dinner, and she was telling me about how her 7 or 8-year-old daughter had a pair of these high heels that she'd gotten from this thrift store, and she was like in love with them, and how she was super excited to wear it for her Christmas, what do you call them, like the family photos. And so right after Christmas, I just sent a quick little update and was like, hey, just wanted to see how your family photos went. How was your daughter happy with wearing those high heels that she was so excited about? And that was one of the biggest connection pieces, more than any of the sales or the questions or the conversations regarding the work we were doing together. That really built that connection, because she was like, oh my God, you care about me as a person. And that's what we're trying to convey. We want you to care about your customers as people, not as numbers, not as a company. You need to care about the person on the other end, because that's where that connection really does start to build.
100%. And that brings us into the final point in active listening, and it benefits you not just in building a relationship but in your negotiations, but because it separates you now from just being another salesperson on the other end of the phone trying to get something from them, and it builds into a trusted partner because they know you're vested in their success. And once you have that relationship secured and you understand their needs and you're delivering on those, it'll lead to the referrals and a bigger book of business with them and others. So pay attention to what your customer is saying when they're talking. Ask the right questions. If you don't know something, write it down and come back to them later on. And sometimes you don't have to have that the answer like we were saying before right away, but if you listen and you write down the question and you get into other conversations, your next conversation, you'll be like, oh, you remember you brought up that one point, and you have the answer for him. They're like, wow, he really paid attention to my call last week and got me what I was looking for without even have to ask again. So pay attention to those little things, because it's all those little things that'll lead you up to success in sales. And we say it time and time again, we're here for you every step of the way. So write it down, go through the worksheet, ask the questions, and put them into action. You never know what happens.
And the active listening part, how many times does that open up opportunities? When a customer knows that you're really listening to them and you actually have solutions for them, it may lead to more business as well. And that's an important piece of this as well. And this is why we want to teach you that the active listening component can accelerate your sales process too, right? The more the customer feels like they're listened to and you're delivering on what they want as a solution, they're more likely to give you more business too. Because a lot of people will try to, and this again, a lot of new reps will try to sell the service that they want to sell to that customer, right? Because they're not really listening to that client. And and then this happens like a lot, and you hear this in like real estate shows, right? And in real estate, it's like they really understand the buyer. Sure, you may like how the house presents, and you may like how it looks and all the bells and whistles of what your style is, but you're not you totally forget about the buyer in mind, right? So it's always keeping that client in mind. What do they want? What do they want to see? And sometimes the worst is like when I want something from a customer and I'm like, hey, can you send me that in an email, and I'm having to search for my answers. Right? Like I don't have that much time, and a lot of customers don't have the time to really search around. They just want the straight goods, straight information. How do you want to receive your information? That's something to always think about. If I want to receive my information, and for me, it's like, again, I want clear communication. I don't want the whole roundabout circles because I don't have that much time. And, so it's being a bit respectful to that time that we have from that client, and saying, okay, hey, if they're busy, let me see how I could deliver what they want specifically and do it in a manner that's really good for them. And so that listening to them how they want their information opens up those doors for opportunities, because you become easier to work with. And the easier you are to work with, more people are going to want to work with you.
Yeah. And I think the cool part is that we all have the ability to, we already have the skill for active listening. It's just a matter of being cognizant of doing it in active situations so that we're putting it into practice. We already know how to listen to a conversation. Like I could talk to Dean here and he could tell me about his weekend, and I could, let it go in one ear and out the other, or I could actually listen and ask questions and be engaged in what he's telling me. And so we do have that skill. Everybody does. It's just how you apply it. So with question number 3 here, we're actually going to get you to reflect a little bit on a personal example of when you actually used active listening and it helped you resolve maybe a misunderstanding or an issue that was kind of going on in your life or somebody else's. So use this as an opportunity to reflect back on, when did I actually use this skill and how did it help me go through a situation?
And it's as simple as the example you just made, asking me how my weekend was. For me, on Monday, when Gail says, hey, how was your weekend when you went to that concert or whatever? Right away I was, wow, it didn't go in one ear out the other. She actually was actively listening, and I could tell her more about how my weekend went. So it's again, those little things that go so far.
And so that leads us into like our next topic, which is emotional intelligence when it comes to customers. And so the active listening component, followed by active listening, is the emotional side of it. And a lot of times when you're making sales calls, you can hear the emotion of the person on the other side of the phone. And this is going to contemplate whether that person's even ready to receive your phone call. And it's also going to contemplate whether, you're going to be able to have a conversation with that person or not. Because you could hear in their voice sometimes, do they have time? What mood are they in? You can just tell by, again, happens more with experience, but you're going to start being able to dictate or understand like the emotion that the other person's in. the other part of that too is you also got to understand that your emotions can also influence the person on the other side of the phone. So even if the person's feeling down, or they're feeling maybe not the best in the beginning, or they sound like they're a little bit frustrated and they get too many of these phone calls, they don't want to hear it, your emotions have the ability to change that. And your ability, the other part is like the ability to learn how to break the ice with customers too. So, saying, okay, hey, understanding like how they feel in that situation and how they are in that situation. You could really change the whole dynamic of that conversation by just understanding that. And typically like the easy one is like, hey, I understand you're really busy right now, but I'm just looking to send over my information to you. Can I get an email address really quick to do that? And then, so if you understand like their time, hey, do you have a minute to have a conversation right now regarding the.
Yeah, and if they don't, having that conversation, saying, hey, I understand you're super busy right now and I don't want to interrupt your day and you're busy getting your work done. Is there a better time? Just that little question can be like, oh yeah, you know what? My Thursday afternoons are pretty wide open. That would be a great time for you to call me back. Can give you that opening to come back and have that longer and more in-depth conversation. So ask those questions.
Yeah, and the second part of that is just being aware of your own emotions. And if you are aware of your own emotions, if you're not feeling good that day and you're just making calls for the spite of just making calls, the other person's gonna feel that too. Like again, it's like talking to a friend that's really down or depressed, and especially like that's probably not the best time to do sales, right? So if you're feeling really down or something, or someone else is feeling really down, how would it feel for that person to hear a sales pitch at that moment? Right? So just thinking about these things like, okay, if I'm down, I don't want to hear a sales pitch. I want to have somebody make me feel better, not worse, right? In that situation. So, again, it's important for us to kind of have that, pre-sales kind of routine, which we talk about. Like I know for myself, it's whether it's eating right, exercise, meditation, clearing my head, just getting into the right frame of mind. So again, if I'm in a happier mood when I'm calling people and I'm in that service mindset, I'm probably going to have better conversations. And at least I want to feel good, because if I feel good, I can make the other person feel good on the other side as well. And that's something that I want to do for my customers, and I want them to feel good. And that's always a priority that we tell even our sales reps, like our job is to make the other person feel as good as possible. Don't look for that in return, because if we're the ones going out and having to pitch, our job always needs to be in service. And if we keep that in mind, we're going to have better results in the long run.
Exactly. You just have to maintain that positive attitude, even when things are going rough. If the customer is, experiencing an issue and they're angry at you, dealing with it with a positive attitude is going to be your number one way of building that confidence in you as a partner. If if your customer is upset and you're getting mad at you and angry, and you get angry back at them, how long do you think that relationship's going to last for? Versus, maybe they're upset and they're frustrated, and so they take it out on you a little bit, and you take it with empathy and understanding their pain points and why they're frustrated and why they're upset, and acknowledging that. That's going to build onto it. And eventually, once they've taken a minute to cool down a little bit, most of the time they've come back and be like, hey man, I'm so sorry, you didn't deserve that. I was just really frustrated, and actually ends up building onto that relationship overall.
And emotional intelligence is more about building that space for that client to be able to vent. Even in a case where they don't want to hear a sales pitch, but allowing them to have that space to say what they want, right? If someone doesn't want to receive that phone call or have that conversation, understand it and allow for that space to happen and acknowledge it. You could even say it back to them, say, I understand you probably didn't want to receive my call today, or, you probably receive 100 of these calls every day. And start with something like that where you acknowledge, the pain point that the customer is going through. And that's just, again, providing empathy, right? And exactly what you were talking about, Gail, is just really understanding that client and really saying, like, we all have hard lives, and people are under certain stresses for work, and just understanding their dynamic as well is going to help us build that relationship.
It's as simple as giving before you ever want to receive. And giving is as simple as, hey, the comment about I understand you're busy today, and quickly do that. Acknowledging that is just giving them the respect, or wishing them, I hope your day is going well today. And if it's that's your introductory email, it's always acknowledging and giving them something before you even start off. Because if you jump right in and right away start talking about what's in it for me, they won't have the time. So again, very important.
Now that we've talked a little bit about emotional intelligence here, question number 4, you're actually going to find the question is name 2 key components of emotional intelligence that help in understanding and connecting with clients effectively. We've named several, so maybe just find the ones that are most relevant to you and to your business and write them down. Kind of reflect on how you could incorporate them into your daily sales and to your strategies. That's going to lead us into the last section of today's episode, which is talking about consistency. And that's where we have to be, the repetition becomes extremely important. If you are consistent for only a little while, maybe in the beginning when you're building that customer, when you're building the relationship and that trust, and then it goes out the window later on, it ends up detracting from that trust that you built. And so that's why credibility becomes so important, because as a salesperson, you need to consistently deliver and drive results that the customer's happy with and they know that they can rely on you. If they can't rely on you, why would they come back to you for more business, right? So we're going to kind of talk about this a little bit further, but it's really about small actions that you repeat time and time and time again. And it doesn't have to be like big, giant, acts of service to try and make sure that they really understand how much of a service provider you are and what you can provide to them. But just little things, right? Like every time you send an email, do you say thank you, or do you just one-line it and send it off? There's so many little aspects that really are going to add to that consistency. Do you provide updates for the truck every single time it's moving? If you do that, that's something you want to continue to emphasize every single time, because it's going to be something that they've come to expect from you. This is going to lead us into the last section of today's episode, which is all about consistency. When it comes to consistency, it's all about building trust over a long period of time. It's really quite a challenge at the beginning to build that initial set of trust, but it's also quite easy to lose it as you continue on and build off of that relationship. When you've built the trust, if you start falling back on what you kind of put in to enforce it from the beginning, it becomes easier for them to go, okay, well, they were very invested in me in the beginning and now they've kind of forgotten about me. And then you start to actually detract from that relationship. So small actions, as you repeat them over time, start to build that credibility for you as a service provider. A good example of that is, in transportation, having on-time pickups and deliveries. If you are always consistent with your pickups and delivery times, you're there when they ask you to be, and then you eventually have a late pickup or a late delivery, when you communicate that, it's not so big of a deal. But if you were always on time at the beginning, and then 6 months into the relationship, things start to, if it's an hour late, 45 minutes late, 6 hours late, it starts to detract from the relationship that you build and overall is going to hurt that relationship.
And it's just like any other relationship that we get into, right, Gail? It's one of those situations, like if you're really interested in a friend or a partner, right? It's if you the minute you get disengaged or you get disinterested in that person, they feel it, right? And again, do you really want to hang out with somebody that isn't interested in hanging out with you? Are you really interested in working with somebody that really isn't showing that interest towards you? And we should always be focused on, like, how do we make our customers feel like they're worth $1 million, right? And regardless of where they are, I do this with large and small customers. I treat them all the same, right? Because every single shipment becomes important. Every single transaction, I wouldn't really call it a transaction, but every interaction becomes important with anybody, because for me, it's again being in that service mindset and maintaining that relationship and just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to value you regardless of whether you have anything or don't have anything, right? Because again, you're human, and I look at that human aspect of it and say, how do I want to treat people? And how do I want to be treated, right, in return?
So as you can see, as we continue to keep talking about the different steps and skills needed to succeed in sales, a lot of this refers back to personal skills that you're dealing with, building relationships outside of the office or outside of the boardroom. You've got opportunities where we talk about consistency right now with Gail's topic, and showing the person that they're appreciated and you acknowledge that them and they're cared for in a personal relationship. If you're with somebody, imagine being with your partner and you're consistently giving them, say, a bouquet of flowers, and they've never gone without a fresh cut bouquet of flowers. Being consistent like that is the constant reminder that this person cares for me. And it's just that small example of how important it is to be consistent on your journey in sales, doing those little things over and over and over again, and to the point where they truly do understand that they're not just heard but appreciated.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like the business context of that relationship, even just providing on-time service, right? Like for us, that's becomes important in our business, is that consistency in delivering the service on time. The pickup happens on time, delivery happens on time, the way they need to be communicated happens on time, and just that is enough, right? So I know like when you talk about the bouquet situation, those are situations where you kind of go above and beyond sometimes, right? You're not going to do that every single day, but just, how do we respect the other person's job, right? And if it's when we're doing sales, the way that we respect them is by delivering the service that we promised them, and doing that on a consistent basis is just us doing our jobs, right? It's not nothing like extra that we have to do in that situation, but for consistency, some people even get complacent in that. And that's the part that gets frustrating for somebody else. It's like, hold on, this company was on time all the time before, but what happened now, right? Like, how come they're not picking up my phone calls anymore? How come they're not returning my email as fast as they used to? How come they're not giving me those answers when I need them, right? So again, that complacency is what breaks that relationship up. And having that, understanding that hey, you know what? We need to treat that customer like the first day that we met them. We have to remember how hungry we were to build that customer, to maintain that relationship, and understand that if we maintain that relationship, we don't have to go out and work so hard to build a new one. We can just maintain it. Maintaining is so much easier than trying to build and trying to gain that trust from somebody again, and trying to, like land that customer. It's so much easier to maintain the one that we already have.
Yeah. And I think Dean gave some really good examples of how you can go above and beyond, but sometimes when it comes to maintaining consistency with your customer interactions, it's actually very simple. It just comes down to keeping your promises, having very precise and clear communication with that customer so that there's no gray area. Everything is black and white, and it makes it much more sustainable for the long term. Some good examples are just keeping your promises and then offering disclaimers of things that can happen so that they already know potential situations as they arrive. In transportation, we see it quite often with sales reps where they say, yeah, I'm available for you 24/7. And then, maybe a year from then they go, hey, I'm actually only available 9 to 5. And that customer goes, well, I always relied on you to be the person I called after hours when I had an emergency or if something came up or if I had a question. So maintaining that consistency, if you say I'm going to be available 24/7, that's the promise that you've made to that customer, and you need to follow through on it. We also see things like guaranteed deliveries. And we do this quite often as well in our companies with having set delivery times, but you also have to provide those disclaimers because you don't want to have that come back and bite you in the butt. For example, we often say, disclaimer of, it'll be here on this date and time, with the exception of things that are outside of our control, or in our terms, it's called force majeure, which is, acts that are like the weather or an accident or something that we cannot control. But it's providing them that guarantee that within the best of our ability, we will try to deliver the service that we promised you. But, there are always things that we can't always control. So those types of conversations do go a long way into just building that credibility.
And it's just that informing that customer ahead of time of what could potentially happen and not after the fact. So being proactive versus reactive. And that's what that strategy is.
And being consistent over complacent, because when complacency sets in and you're not doing those on-time deliveries anymore, that's when that trust is lost. So if you're not just doing those table stakes, the things you're supposed to be doing, but trying to go a little bit above and beyond to show that they're appreciated and their business is important to you, will keep that trust nice and strong and build that long-lasting partnership.
Yeah. And I want to back it up a little bit here because we've talked a lot about once the relationship is already established, but a lot of you guys are just starting your sales journey. So what do you do to be consistent when it comes to building your customers before you've actually got them and you've got your book of business? It comes down to, how do you follow up? How do you stay in contact with these people and start to build those relationships? And one of the easiest ways we can do that is by having a follow-up strategy and sticking to it. We see it quite often. You'll be talking to a person on the phone. They say, I'm really busy right now, but why don't you call me next Tuesday? 9 times out of 10, sales reps forget and don't call them back next Tuesday. But that's so important. If you pick up that phone Tuesday morning and say, hey, Bob, it's me, Gail, you said to call you on Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Let's have that conversation now. They're going to remember. And like we talked about with the active listening, they're going to say, wow, Gail was paying attention. She listened to what I asked. She followed my directions. And that's already starting to build that trust.
So as you can see, as we wrap up today's episode on building trust and open communication, there's a lot of little skills in there that is going to help you build that trust you need to have a long-lasting partnership with your customer. Every opportunity you have with them is an opportunity to either gain that trust or lose it. So it's being consistent, it's showing up on time, and like Gail was just saying, if you're going to call on Tuesday, it's making that call on Tuesday. If you're studying in school, it's doing your homework. And right now, if you're studying to succeed in sales and succeed in life, it's showing up and doing your homework. Go back to your worksheet, go over these questions. Have questions, come back to us, and we're happy to answer them. And this will lead us into our last episode, this coming up in establishing sustainable relationships. And it's going to be talking about managing long-term partnerships. So we look forward to seeing you soon. Until then, take care and best of luck.
Bye, guys.